For more on this, we're now joined by Thato wa Magogodi, international relations analyst, and he joins us via our video link. Thato, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Of course, that much anticipated outcome expected by many across the world in terms of what the ICJ will say in this case in relation to Israel and South Africa. But let's start off here. What are your expectations when it comes to what we will be hearing tomorrow? Do you think that the ICJ will order Israel to suspend military operations?
Well, good evening, Bali, and good evening to your viewers. I think my main expectation for tomorrow at 1 o'clock, when Judge Joan Donok announces the verdict of the ICJ, is that she will hand down a fair judgment based on the arguments presented by both parties. Knowing that South Africa has presented a very strong case based on empirical evidence, I'm convinced that with the mountain of evidence against the 5 basic acts of genocide as defined by the 1948 Genocide Act, South Africa has been able to, produce adequate information that substantiates the fact that Israel is in the wrong. And therefore, a fair judgment, in my opinion, tomorrow would entail the bench of 15 agreeing to the fact that South Africa has been able to prove intent in terms of what Israel has been doing that can be characterized as genocide, and therefore Israel must be given marching orders, which marching orders include those provisional marching orders that South Africa has requested for. So for me, that would be the essence at the high level of a fair judgment.
And, there is concern over those provisional orders that may arise coming out from tomorrow's order from the court. And there's concern that what if Israel does not abide by those orders?
Well, it is true that Israel, being the belligerent and defiant state that it is, it may defy those orders. So the fundamental question that can be posed and must be answered is, what is South Africa's recourse? I suppose it is understood that the ICJ has got 2 basic powers. Firstly, to resolve these disputes between states, and secondly, to give opinions to organs of the UN, but it does not have enforcement powers. So the expectation is that if Israel defies, then South Africa would have to take this case to the UN Security Council to request it to enforce. Of course, if you look at the nature of the UN Security Council and the fact that it is controlled by the P5, it is known that America, which is an ally of Israel, is likely to veto those orders if they think they lash against Israel. Now, then the question would be, what is the next step? My view is that South Africa must then take it to the General Assembly. We know that the General Assembly has in the past rebuked Israel on this conduct. But I think what is key now is for South Africa now to mobilize the entire membership of the UN to support the resolutions that enforce these orders. But importantly, above that, craft sanctions that would remind Israel that this genocide that they're committing is actually a crime against humanity, as they did with apartheid in South Africa, so that Israel is able to follow those orders. If the Kampala Declaration is anything to go by, then there is cause to be hopeful that in the General Assembly, those members of the non-alignment movement that already have rebuked Israel in the sitting that NAM had in Kampala last week, would be able to support South Africa to come up with a resolution that would be able to not just rebuke, but to call on Israel to follow the marching orders. But importantly, the question of ensuring that they're able to impose hurtful sanctions that would take Israel towards implementing those orders, but importantly, sanctions that would be hurtful enough for Israel to go back to the negotiations table so that they're able to discuss the two-stage solution, which is on everybody's tongue in this process.
And Thato, when you talk about the recourse that South Africa has, if Israel refuses to abide by those orders, I mean, one would say that it sounds like a very lengthy process. At the same time, hearing from the United Nations Security Council not so long ago, earlier this week, I mean, there are people starving, there are people dying in Gaza. How long can a process like that take for South Africa to ensure that whatever order comes out, that it is implemented by Israel?
Well, unfortunately, the wheels of international law turn very slowly. It is for that reason that South Africa took its chance by calling for an urgent response, which I think for now we can confirm that with a response on the verdict being given as early as now in January, hardly a month after South Africa presented on the 29th of December, there has been at least some kind of movement because the judges do recognize the urgency of the situation in Palestine and the fact that carnage is taking place on a daily basis there, homes being destroyed, Israel also preventing the passage of humanitarian aid, the fact that the food infrastructure there has been destroyed, and when aid can come in, it's a cause of concern for the entire international community, and therefore everybody realizes the urgency of this matter. Even the judges, I think, who are presiding on this matter realize that this is not a matter that you should postpone for a later time. And obviously, they heed to the concern that South Africa raises in its submission that this is indeed something urgent that you cannot take time to respond to.
And another matter that, the rest of the international community really wants to hear from this court is the issue around the acts of genocide here that South Africa has accused Israel of. When can we hear the finality in that matter? Because I understand that is still going to take some time before this court delivers on that verdict. Well,
I'm not an international law expert. I would not know that. But I know that at least the principle of agency is recognized by everyone. Where we are now is for the court to respond to South Africa's request for those marching orders, stopping the genocide, allowing the passage of food aid into Israel, into the occupied Palestine, so that the Palestinians at least are able to be food secure, allowing medical aid to be deployed in all parts of occupied Palestine, Gaza in particular, and to ensure that life returns to normality. I think for everyone in the international community, that is the key thing that should return. We're not interested in the nuts and bolts of the paperwork. Once there's normality, at least the next understanding is that there would be discussions from all major parties involved so that they're able to bring everybody to the negotiations table. But one thing that I think we must never miss, as everybody is discussing this matter from a perspective of looking at Israel and Palestine, is the fact that this war, and why it would probably delay for us to get some kind of finality on all these issues, is a proxy war of a broader international question of the US trying to defend its hegemony as the only superpower that has been controlling the world in terms of a unipolar world, and the fact that it is anxious about the fact that the world is moving towards a multipolar world. So we must know that the US will be one of the players that must be closely watched in terms of its machinations and whether it would truly be carrying the hammer to pull Israel along to say, please stop the carnage, please go back to the negotiations table, because they are the ones who are funding actually the war efforts of Israel. $3 billion of US aid being given to the IDF on an annual basis. And it is said that he pays the piper, plays the tool, and the US is at the center of this conflict. And I think I want to see a point where they are also held before the ICJ to go and answer about their role in this war, so that they're able to realize that they cannot continue this way when lives, innocent lives for that matter, are being lost for no reason, and collective punishment being meted on all Palestinians, despite the fact that the blame is on Hamas.
Yeah. Thato, thank you so much for your contribution on the show here tonight on SABC News. That is Thato wa Magogodi, international relations analyst, just giving us an insight and his expectations when it comes to that verdict that we'll be hearing tomorrow at 2 p.m. sharp from the International Court of Justice.